Hello, Silas here, and I'm back with my friend Stephen. Say what's up to the peoples.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good day.
And this is Dishing on Dish, and today we're continuing the conversation about Dolly Varden, so getting into that. So, with the Dishing on Dish series, Stephen goes to different places. He's a gourmand of sorts. Besides being human foie gras, he's worked in the food service industry, and he tells us different things about the places he goes to, primarily in New York City for now, and we'll expand later. And this is one in many, many, many of these that we've done. I think it's the 10th restaurant we're doing, and this is Dolly Varden, and we're going to read. I'm going to read you just a bit from the website, and Stephen will tell us a bit about it. Then we'll get into the food. Okay, so this is what's written on the website. The inspiration. Creatively inspired by New York City's Gilded Age through the Roaring '20s Jazz Age, Dolly Varden serves creative cocktails and elevated venues in Hell's Kitchen. The name Dolly Varden has always been a symbol of feisty endurance. Long before influencers, Dolly Varden was a cultural phenomenon inspiring fashion, theater, song, art, and commerce, conceptually based on the eponymous coquette concocted by Mr. Charles Dickens decades earlier. As another enduring symbol, Dolly Varden was also the name of the last passenger train locomotive to run up the west side of Manhattan, just blocks away. So yeah, Stephen, tell us a bit about this restaurant besides the crafted thing they put here, just a bit of the differences that we've already talked about, how this restaurant is different from many of the places that we've done in this series that are just strictly food-based.
Sure. So Dolly Varden opened. It was. I remember it started to open before lockdown, and then because of the lockdown, everything was put on pause. But they continued to reopen when the restrictions started ending. I came back from my stay with my family about Easter of last year or so, and that's when they started opening the place. And it replaced the old House of Brews. House of Brews I talked about was, I don't know, it was kind of a basic bar. I mean, the beer selection was really good, as you could probably tell by the title, but the food was chicken wings, burgers, standard bar stuff, nothing special. But with this place, I was really impressed because the menu was definitely very elevated, especially for what it's presenting itself as. Plus, they have a nice craft cocktails list. We're only talking about food so far. We'll get into cocktails later. But I really thought for a place that just advertises itself as a casual restaurant and bar, I mean, the food is definitely way above average, I would say.
Now, this is the thing. We've focused on places that are primarily restaurants that might have just, some of them do have an extensive wine selection, but this one is almost like a bar restaurant, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, they do have wine too, but it's like 3 or 4 by the glass, and there's a few bottles, but I mean, it's nothing,
Do you think this is
crazy.
something to do with the New York City zoning, where it's a different sort of zoning for like a bar restaurant or a full-on bar versus a restaurant, where the people who took over from the last place had to actually take advantage of the bars, or maybe the facilities in there had more space for actually doing like a full-on bar? What do you think influenced that, or could they just have said we're going straight full-on restaurant?
I know there's different legal liabilities with that. Like, for example, when I was in culinary school, I had a teacher who owned a restaurant and they served alcohol, but she was saying that the alcohol sales had to be below a certain percentage, because if they went higher, they would be classified as a bar. And if you're classified as a bar, then there's certain legal liabilities and all that. And I guess she and her husband, one, were trying to avoid that, but also it's about the kind of place you are and like the clientele you're catering towards. Because if you want to be a bar, likely you'll apply for a liquor license. Liquor licenses, of course, here are expensive. There's liabilities with, like, if someone gets drunk and they drive, I think you're more likely to be sued. There's things like, I mean, I don't know all the details off the top of my head, but there's different liabilities, and it's like, and again, like, who are you catering to? Because what she was doing was a family restaurant that served some beer and wine, but she didn't have a liquor license. But if she sold enough of it, then it would be classified as a bar. So I think it's different legal things, and I'm not 100% sure. Probably different rules about, like you say, zoning. Like, if you need certain security, it's just different classification. Yeah.
Okay, so somewhere like in like a Huertas, which we've done Huertas or a Minetta Tavern. Do they have liquor licenses?
Yeah, they do. Because if you go
Okay.
there, because if you go there, they have like whiskey, gin, vodka, whatever. Yeah.
So if you go to a restaurant and you just have wine and beer, you don't need a liquor license?
Yeah. At least that's how it is. Last I checked. Yeah. You can sell beer
Okay.
and wine. You can sell beer and wine, but if you want to sell hard liquor, you got to pay the fee and get the license and all.
Okay,
So.
cool. So with Dolly Varden, since they bought the location from the previous place, they probably have some kind of deal where maybe you buy with the license, maybe because the area is licensed already. Do you have to reapply? How does
I th-
work
if
in this?
I'm not 100% sure. As far as I know, though, there's rules if you drink it, if you have a liquor license and you drink and drive, you'll actually lose it. I think if your customers were to get too drunk or you were to serve underage people, you would lose it. But I think it's held by the person themselves, like the owner themselves. But I'm not 100% on
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of odd if the person can move, so you can move around with it. But okay, so you can move around with it, but then still to open your place, you're still going to need to have some kind of certification. So once you have the liquor license, then you can put the facilities
Yeah.
to serve liquor. Then the people still have to come and
Yeah.
double check and make sure and give
Yeah.
you an okay that it's okay. So
Because
yeah,
you're serving it to the public, so that's the risks that come with that. Like if someone gets into a car and drives away because you gave them too much liquor when they were clearly drunk, like you're
mhm.
legally liable and all that. Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, so with this one, the way we normally do this series is we talk about specific things as part of the You Are What You Consume series, which is just basic things about food. And with that series, we have things where we're talking about maybe the New York food industry, how menus and recipes come to be, but Dish and Dishes specifically focusing on food. And we're going to get into that right now. But in the first part of these ones, whenever we do part one of a particular restaurant, we go more into like the place, location, tables, ambiance, the content, like the menu, fixed price combos, seasonal, varied, or permanent. And we talk a bit about the actual food in itself, like the challenges of making some of the food if they have a cookbook. But you can check out part one of it if you want more of the discussion on that, where we show the menu. But there's links below wherever you're listening to this to part one and also to chefniteup.carbon33.com, where you'll be able to find some posts of my food, Steven's Steven's Instagram will also be somewhere here. He posts a lot of his food up there. I'll try to get him to start posting on chefniteup.com. Also, and then this series will also be on Chef and Up as a dish on dish. But then there's links to like this the rest of the stuff that I have. So anything else you want to say about Dolly Varden before we get into the actual food?
Not really. I think we've given a few introductions, so.
Okay, so now if you're watching the video version of this, our beautiful faces are going to go off the screen, and we're going to get into the actual dishes now. So the way this works is Stephen sends me a document with the different dishes, and then I say the names of them, list what he's indicated, and then we just kind of go back and forth, and we meander here and there, and sometimes we have 30 minutes conversations based off of different things that come up in a dish. Sometimes it's just like the dish, and we're like, yeah, that looks good, let's move on. It's like 2 or 3 minutes. But we'll try to get this one done in this part. We've done part one, which is most of like half of the food, and we'll try to get the food done in this part, or we normally aim for like an hour and a half. We've talked about doing some short ones where Steven might have gone to one restaurant and for not as many times. He didn't go one time and eat all this food, as you get to see. He's been there several times and has collected that. But with this one, we're going to just talk about this one. We'll have some short ones where we're focusing on one restaurant or a few restaurants in different kinds of ways. But now we'll just get into this, try to get the food done in this part, and then we'll have a separate part just for the cocktails because they got some really interesting cocktails here from Dolly Varden. Okay.
Mhm.
So getting into the first one, we have a tortellini di conejo. This is caramelized onion puree, marjoram, and parmesan tuile.
Sure. So this I actually had yesterday. I updated the document. So conejo, for those who don't know, that's Spanish for rabbit. It's interesting, like Italian pasta, and then de conejo is Spanish, but I guess that's how they wanted to do it. So it's a tortellini. It's a pasta from Emilia Romagna in the north. Those a lot of people have probably seen tortellini. It's a pretty popular pasta. Rabbit meat inside, caramelized onion puree. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The onions caramelized, pureed. I don't think they added dairy or anything by the darker color. I think they just pureed them as is. Marjoram, that's the greens on top. Marjoram is I'm trying to think of how to describe it. It's forget if it's in the mint family technically. It has a distinct flavor to it though. Let's see here. I'm trying to think
Marjoram.
of how to I'm trying to think of how to describe it. Let's see.
I'm trying to think if I've had it.
It's actually related to oregano. It's
Okay.
yeah. And it's also I'm trying to think of how to describe it. It's big in the Middle East. Big in the Middle East, but it's also they've grown it in other areas too. I guess the British Isles, they started growing it there. So I guess it grows in a lot of places. Wasn't popularly used in the US until after World War II. So I'm trying to think how to describe it here. Yeah, it's a seasoning. So it's, I guess, sort of similar to oregano. It kind of has its own characteristic, though. Maybe a little, oh, sweeter is the right way to put it. Yeah, I wish I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of how I would describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone can think of a way to describe it to somebody who's never had it, let us know in the comments or just wherever you can. Let us know. Yeah, but I mean, it's just
And then
tortellini.
Parmesan.
Just
What one
yeah,
thing?
go ahead.
So then the Parmesan tuile is just, it's very easy to make. It's just Parmesan on a silpat. Usually that's the fiberglass underliner you put on a baking tray. Usually, you just lay out Parmesan whatever shape you want. You bake it. The Parmesan melts and it browns a little, and then you cool it, and then it gets crispy. And then you put those. You can either break it into pieces or put whole pieces on the dish. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to see now with this. Where is?
The
Because I
tuile
thought
there.
that was just. I thought that was like grated Parmesan. What's?
Well, there is grated Parmesan too, but there's actually pieces. It's a little hard to see, but there's pieces of it sort of sprinkled throughout. My guess is they probably made bigger pieces and broke those up into
Oh, I think I
smaller pieces.
see
And
some of
yeah,
that.
it's like a light golden brown color.
Yeah, I see some.
Yeah,
Okay, okay. So yeah, that's probably an interesting mouth. Now with the rabbit, is it like is it chopped up? Is it like the string kind of like because it's more of a I would say fibrous. Fibrous doesn't really sound like the right thing to say with
yeah.
meat. It's stringy. So is stringy the right thing to say?
I wouldn't say
Uh,
stringy either, because the thing is, you say
Gamey? I
fibrous.
don't know.
Well, you say the problem is you say stringy or fibrous. People just picture people like picture like stuff getting stuck in their teeth. So
Yeah.
I would I would say it's a very it's one description is fine textured white meat. It looks almost like chicken meat. The way this was prepared, it was almost like pulled pork, like that kind of like
Yeah, that's what I was trying to
shredded.
think. Is that
Yeah,
that's how it is inside? Yeah.
kind of shredded. Rabbit has its distinct flavor though. It's similar to chicken. People always say everything tastes like chicken. It's like a little bit, but it's a little bit like chicken, but it does have its own flavor too because it's a wild animal. So
Yeah.
that's the meat inside, and yeah, it's a really nice dish. I thought, why not get a photo and add it to the presentation?
So now this one, it's just the rabbit in the inside
Yeah,
the cognac. So it's okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. So you'll have that, and then you have the pasta around it, that kind of al dente type of take, and then the crispiness of the parmesan and the
yep.
herbs. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting mix of the dish here. But this is something that we've seen. This is the first one that we're talking about in this part. But I definitely suggest for y'all go back and check out the first part. Check out the rest of the series. I mean, it's pretty good stuff. But there's something about this particular restaurant. Maybe it's because in the previous ones that we've done, it's been more. It's more themed to a certain sort of cuisine. Even the ones like with Felidia that take different sorts of mixes, but it was still Italian. It was a mix of Italian, even though Italian for different regions is very different. So they
Yeah.
would maybe have a base of one region, then add like flavors and ingredients from another region. Or they'll have the flavors and ingredients from a certain region, and then they'll do a preparation from like another place. That's how that place is mixed it. But most of the places we did were mostly focused on some kind. I guess Seasonal might have been one that might have been a little more, but that was like 5 parts. We went
Well,
into
but I
many
always said
different places, but it still had
what
some basics, right?
well, with seasonal, what I always said was that we weren't strictly adhering to the Austrian German thing, like a few like national dishes, a few famous ones, and like higher end versions of those. But then everything else was just kind of whatever, you know. It's not strictly adhering to the theme. I mean, even my sous chef there, who was Austrian himself, even said that like we're not strictly adhering to this. It's like a few items that like people from Austria and Germany who are familiar can come and have an elevated version of schnitzel, goulash, Tafelspitz, things like that. But then everything else is just kind of its own thing. So you appeal to different people. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. We've also seen that where someone like Huertas would be doing mostly the Spanish. Was it the Basque region? Was
Basque
under
region, yeah.
so
Yeah.
they were doing that, but now they would do some more maybe current, contemporary cooking styles and do things, or do like the not the open. What's that thing when they say where it's like with the strudel instead of in the full strudel, it's broken down and
Oh,
not
like
broken down,
deconstructed.
deconstructed, that kind of thing. So they'll have that kind of thing. So we see that, but with this restaurant, it's from all over the place. Like he's bringing in, he's just like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Like for today, for example, I just made some potato leek soup, and then it said he's supposed to use like some sage, but then since we didn't have, or some fresh rosemary, Oh, yeah, fresh rosemary. We did have fresh rosemary out here in the herb garden, so I decided to use cilantro. I think it's like a common thing here. Also, when then I did some kind of stew with like minced meat stew with bell peppers, like red bell peppers, yellow bell peppers, green bell peppers, some tomatoes that I like condensed down. Took some of the leek soup before I like pureed it down and put some of that in there, and then just like a fried rice, and then you had that together. So with that, it's not necessarily like any particular sort of cuisine. Like that's just like a mix of different things. It was like, okay, this is what I have in the kitchen. This is kind of the base that I want. I knew the soup was something I want to do. I had the mincemeat prepared from before. So now from that, I was like, okay, let me just look in the fridge and put what's together. And I think that's how these people seem to be doing their food more. They're more like, okay, these are ingredients that we like making. Okay, I like this style from something like here, like you said. You might have said this even before, or I don't know if you said it in this conversation right now. But this is Italian. The tortellinis are Italian, but then the corneo is not. And then
Yeah.
like the marjoram, is that really Italian thing? So it's kind of that's the kind of thing that I've really appreciated from this restaurant.
Yeah. And the thing is too, I mean, there's like that's why I don't like the whole like purist cuisine thing because it's like if you have different flavors from other places at work, I mean, why not do them? Yeah. And then I sort of make fun of one of my old bosses because he used to say his food is Italian without borders, but I was like, that's a contradiction in terms because a country is defined by its borders. So, so it's like but I get what he's saying. It's like it's broadly Italian, but it draws influences from elsewhere. That's kind of what he's getting at. But like literally, it's a contradiction in terms.
Yeah, if I had a restaurant, I think it'd be more this style. But now I'm wondering, like we'll see this once we get to the cocktails. When we get to the cocktail part of it, he'll also tell us what dish he had with the cocktails. He's not
Yeah.
telling us that now, but with most of these, he had some drink with them. But maybe they had in mind where, okay, the cocktail is already a big feature of it, so we don't have to attract people necessarily for a specific kind of food. We're just now going to taste many different kinds of food, and some of them, creating them when you might have had some idea of this should go that. Did you end up asking them? I think you said you were going to ask them if there's like, but you said normally like you're the server, the person coming to the waiter is supposed to come and have some knowledge or sometimes have some suggestion or this goes good with this wine or that goes good with this. But I'm wondering if there's like actually them thinking like this should be paired with this cocktail, that should be paired with that cocktail.
It's interesting. I never really asked because I mean usually it's they just recommend cocktails that they prefer. Like, oh, you like espresso martini? We have one that's similar to this. Oh, you like cocktails made with red wine? We have this. I've never asked for a pairing there. I mean, I just do it on my own, but I'd be curious as to what they would say if someone were to ask. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you can check it out. We'll see if you remember. If not, no, whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, okay. So on to the next one.
Yep.
So pan-seared duck breast, which is Sancho puree, candied orange, mandarin confit, and Trevigiano with duck jus.
Sure. So if you notice here, I submitted 3 different photos. The reason is that the presentation changed a bunch of times. Again, notice the variation in the photo quality. Like I said, that's because I got a new phone, so the new photos look a little nicer. I was saying one thing that I think is good about this place is that they tweak presentations based on guest feedback. Like they've asked me, like, "Hey, what did you think of this dish? Do you think it needs anything?" All this. So I think they're very good about responding to that. And I like the duck sliced a lot, like on the bottom one, because it's just easier to eat. I mean, you have to make sure it rests well so the meat doesn't bleed out. But I like that swoosh of puree and all that. So sunchokes, for those people who don't know, that's in the tuber family. I'm trying to think of how to describe it exactly. It's not exactly like celery root, but it's like it looks almost like ginger kind of, but it's in smaller pieces. It's in smaller segments, and it doesn't taste anything like ginger though. It's kind of like sweeter, a little nuttier. I love sunchokes personally. I mean, I've made soup, purees, all that with this. It goes well with a lot of different things. I think I had mentioned last time our friend Ray has a joke because she's pale. She didn't know what a sunchoke was, and I explained it. She said, "As somebody pale, I'm happy to choke out the sun," or something like that. And candied orange, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. There's just candied zest here. That just goes on the top. The middle one, actually, you'll notice there's some brown orangish squares. That's actually guava paste. That was something they were putting on at one point just to sort of, add another flavor. Um, Mandarin confit, again, as I've said before, confit means something simmered and cooled in its own fat. My sense here is that this orange is probably cooked in oil or something, simmered a bit, and then they char it on the outside so it's brown, it's caramelized a little bit. And then Trevisano is a type of green. It's a radicchio type of green, so it's like a bitter purple lettuce. And then duck jus, that's just the so I think that's most people know what jus is. It's just a reduction of the pan drippings made into a sauce and poured on the plate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this sunchoke is like a potato-fied ginger. It's like
Yeah.
it's kind of just like more swollen up. Yeah, so yeah, I like that the last one, the third one. I don't know. I'll try to show them in order. But the
Sure.
third plating, yeah, with the cuts, with the one that's already
Yeah.
cut out. And yeah, I think this is the thing yeah, it's there was the Trevigiano on this side. The colors seem pretty good. I mean, this is just like a different take because we've talked about duck before, and that first
Yeah.
plating of it with the what's that orangish type of thing? Is that the
That's
candied
the
orange? Yeah,
yeah, it's a mandarin confit on
yeah.
the right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
so that one on that first plating, that's the typical way that you see duck. Just like
Yeah.
I mean, and then like maybe just like I've seen too many of them. We've talked about it so much. It looks kind of boring, but it's like the
Yeah.
typical way to present duck. No one's really going to be upset when you do this. And part of the reason that it's done that way is also so you can see the skin and the way it's cooked
Yeah.
to make sure the readiness. That's just part of the typical way to present it. So I like that they try different things. That second one seems to be the duck's kind of hiding. You
Yeah.
can't really see it. It's kind of just thrown together. I'm definitely not nowhere that good at plating things. So getting some ideas from this. That
Yeah.
third one just looks better. Just looks
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people know me. I love duck, so it's like if there's a duck dish on the menu, I probably ordered it. I got one the other day at the place I went to. I think this is like a play on duck à l'orange. Like they didn't want to copy that dish, but it's like you can tell it's playing with those flavors, but then adding other things too, just to make it something a little different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that just goes into what we were talking about with this place, just trying different things and different takes and on the typical kind of food, and yeah, that could be cool because no, actually, I don't know even with the cocktails. You said the cocktails also switch around and things like that. They get changed. So this could be a different kind of take on restaurants. Like now you have things like the Thai wings we talked about the first part, where they're going to be some key things that stay, but then you have a small, fluctuating, seasonal, different kind of take on things. It also gets it more interesting for the people who are regulars because you can still come there, you can still get the same flavors, but maybe with slightly different presentation, slightly different take on it. But I prefer that kind of more loose sort of cooking. Although I know there's some people who will swear on just like let's just have the same things, and some people are okay with that. Like you've worked in restaurants, and you know there's places
Yeah.
where some people just come in weekly, like multiple times a week, order pretty much the same few dishes, and it's just like what they're used to. This is just their go-to place. But I like this flexibility and this changing around.
Yeah, I mean, I probably talked about it before, but places vary a lot because there are places like one of my friend worked at some farm to table places downtown where it's basically the chef will go to go to market, buy a bunch of stuff, and just come up with stuff for that day, and then run it out and then do new stuff. Then there's other places like I was thinking of Alain Ducasse's Benoit Bistro. They have stuff that's been on the menu there for like 30 years now. So, but then you have to realize like again, who are you playing to? Like, do you want to be this old school French place that does certain classics and people come back and get those things? Then you have a combination of some regulars, some of it, some a little bit of a revolving door of like people coming in and out, or do you want to be a place that does new stuff all the time? But then the challenge too, like I know, I think I might have mentioned him before, Charlie Trotter. He's no longer alive, sadly, but he had a 2 Michelin star restaurant in Chicago, and he was known for changing his menu so frequently. People would come back and ask for stuff, and he would say, "We don't do that anymore." So that's the other side of that is if you have something that's really good and you take it off, well, it's gone now. I guess the way to remedy that would be to either bring it back periodically or put it in a cookbook or something. So I think you have to kind of weigh those concerns, and I think what they're doing here is they keep certain things like the Thai wings we talked about, the baby back ribs, certain things that people always get, those stay on the menu. Then everything else just kind of comes and goes depending on the season and how popular it is. Yeah.
Okay, so now here we're going to go to more of the duck, and it's good to
Yep.
see different parts of the bird being used.
Yep.
I know in most of the cooking in other countries, here it's common to use like when you make a stew and you things like that. You use the back. You use the back, the full back. So there's the top back. It's normally back and where the back of the breast is. Then the bottom of the back as well. We normally cut those into two pieces. The neck is a common thing. Even still today, yes, I talked about how like my mom like used to use the whole bird to get to the point where it was like the actual legs or the claws and the intestines. That's not used as commonly now, but the gizzard, the heart, the liver, the kidneys. No, there's no kidneys. Very small kidneys on there.
Yeah.
the chicken. But so the liver is the interiors, because the birds are normally still, they're not to the point where they're being factory farmed yet, where there's a lot of antibiotics and things like that going to the interior. So the interiors are still rather fresh and still rather usable, and it's still used. So we normally get a full chicken, you break it down, and you'll make a full stew with everything in it. So like duck legs, but duck legs normally used for confit. But I hardly see any other dishes from Western cooking that actually has like the back of the chicken, unless you're doing like a full-on rotisserie or a full-on like a full-on whole bird like that, like a
Yeah.
big like then the back will come out. But when you're doing pieces, I don't think there's hardly ever a time where you see like yes, the back is included, which is okay, I guess.
Well,
You
with
get
duck,
the
same thing as you just stated. The legs are usually confit. If you eat the legs straight away, it's usually a whole roasted duck that just gets carved up, and
mhm.
someone like you have the breast, you have the leg, whatever.
Yeah, and that's what we have here, which is a duck leg confit with the lepui lentils and lardons and kabocha squash.
Sure. So I think we've talked about it a lot, but I'll restate for those who don't know. Confit means something classically simmered and cooled in its own fat. Duck is very popular for this because, as you know, duck is a very fatty
Yeah.
animal. So typically, you cut off the legs, you cure them. There's usually salt, sugar, different spices. I mean, people do aniseed, you could do cinnamon, you could do all this different stuff. Juniper berries, that's popular. You let them sit in the cure for so long. The cure, it flavors the meat, but also helps preserve it. Then you cook it in its own fat. You can either do it on the stove top or do it in the oven. The idea is that it's done when the meat is tender enough that it pulls off the bone. Let it cool in the own fat, and then cool in its own fat, and then when it's ready to use, you pull it out of the fat, scrape off the fat, and you can do different things. What they did here was they left the leg intact, but they hit it probably with a broiler on top so the skin is crispy. The other thing I see people do is they'll shred up the meat and then put it in things like you can put it in pasta or put it in some other dish. So Lepui lentils here, they're from France. So they're actually sometimes sold as French green beans. Basically they're grown in a certain region in France. There's it's one of those appellation things, sort of like with wine, like there's a prefecture called Le Puy, and it's like you have to grow them and sell them there. So I guess that's a whole like protectionist idea. I don't think there's anything that unique about them. Otherwise, they have sort of a peppery flavor, which is a little different from other lentils, and also they're hardy, so they hold up their shape after you cook them, which is nice. Um, Lardon means it's bacon, but it's the pork belly, but it's cut up into thicker pieces, rectangle, so it's not thin, crispy bacon. It's like little short, squat pieces. Kabocha squash, it's this green skin squash from Japan. It has orange inside, as you can see. And then on top here, we have some of that candied orange zest. We have some amaranth, chives. Wish I could remember what the white was. I'm trying to remember now. Really nice dish though. This was a dish I spent some time with my family, and I came back when it was really cold, and I ordered this. This is a really nice cold weather dish. I mean, now it's warming up, but like on a cold winter day, this is a really good dish to have. Yeah. Oh, you're muted still.
I'm looking at the kabocha squash, and we have something similar here. I don't know
Yeah.
if it might be a different one. I'll go and double check on the images because we've actually been growing out here, where but we normally just cut it into like chunks and steam it or boil it a bit and just eat it that
Yeah.
way. It's not necessarily cooked in this way, but yeah, I mean lardons. Whenever you can have a baconish thing, it's good for me. Not too big on the duck. It's a gamey animal. It's really strong smell. It comes from it's a weird animal. Even just like the shape of it,
Yeah.
just like this kind of like longness. I'm just used to like chicken more than that, but it's just like this little longness of the bird. Of course, now the fat is there for the swimming nature of it. Now, I'm trying to think of how often I've had geese, but I don't think I've ever like broken down a full-on goose, like the whole bird. Um,
It's similar. It's very similar to duck. It has a little bit of a gamey flavor. Like if I had duck and goose side by side, I think I could tell them apart. It's pretty close though. I mean, fat content's about the same. Goose, it's a slightly gamey flavor. People have actually called the Canadian goose the roast beef of the skies, which is interesting because because it's a richer meat. Like I mean, duck is obviously rich and fatty, but if you have goose, it has like a distinct kind of gamier flavor to it. I've broken down duck before. It's really interesting. It's different from chicken because you figure chicken's white meat. This is all red. It's a higher fat content. duck, there's actually a thick wall of fat along the outside. So typically what you
Yeah.
do when you break down the duck is you cut off the fat and then you put that aside and you render that down. Usually you put it in a pot, a little bit of water so the fat doesn't brown, and then that renders down, and then you cool that and you use that for duck confit or to cook in or other things. Yeah.
That's a good. I mean, that's the simple idea with the fat thing. Because
Yeah.
I normally like I've broken down duck before. I said, as I said,
Yeah.
I haven't broken down goose. Do people eat swan?
That's a good question. Not that I've seen.
Okay. I'm trying to think of like other like water birds. All right. So we with those, because I normally will, when I break down an animal, like I'll cut the fats off. Even when I'm doing like beef or things like that, we'll cut the fat off, and then if I'm cooking, I'll use that cooking fat, but I'll put it in the pan and then fry it in it. But that's a good idea. You just put it in water, and then you can, yeah, once it cools down, that way you don't have to worry about it. And you can have it as the oil and keep it that way. So that's something I might consider later on. But yeah, with the duck, it's a strange bird, and you said it's it's just a weird looking bird. It's a weird looking creature in general. But yeah, the squash. Another thing with the lentils. Hmm. So this is now. I think. Well, yeah. I guess it's just like a dish with that, where it's like an entire dish. Yeah, it looks like it's enough to just have as a full on meal, especially if you had like an appetizer, if you're having a dessert after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all duck is also fatty, so it's like,
Yeah.
unless you're super hungry. I mean, I think when I came, I only had that. I mean, that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really have too much to say. Like as I
No.
mentioned with the duck, I'm just like, yeah, but we've talked about duck before, and also went
Yeah.
to the duck in the previous one. So yeah, now we can jump on to the next dish here, and we have some pork milanese with fennel salad and Calabrian chili vinaigrette.
This was a nice simple dish. It's interesting because it's I wouldn't say it's light, but it's not too heavy either. It's you can tell the pork chop bone in. Milanese, it's a breaded and fried preparation, comes from Milan. I think I mentioned before the schnitzel was copied off of that basically. So it's breaded and fried bone on, and then they cut it through the middle after, so you get like, sort of the texture of like the fried crispy outside. There's still the bone. It's still moist inside, which is really nice. What's interesting though is that typically Milanese as well as schnitzel, it's typically pounded thinner, whereas this is a thick cut. So one challenge with this is you have to make sure it's browned on the outside properly, but it's cooked through inside as well. Because if it's thicker, it's going to need more time in the fryer. Um, the salad here, you can see it's shaved fennel, radishes, red watercress, which I like a lot, and yeah, I'm trying to remember what vinaigrette. I think it was just like a light lemon vinaigrette or something. And then Calabrian chili vinaigrette. You can tell it's a spicy peppers with vinegar on the outside. Really simple, but very well done dish. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks good. Is red meat in general heavier than white meat?
Yeah, higher fat content. Well, it's the hemoglobin is what makes it red, but also usually they're higher fat content. So that's why like duck is fatter than chicken, because like I was saying with duck, there's that thick wall of fat. You trim some of it off and then you render it down if you're cooking the breast. Whereas with chicken, there's that very thin layer. Yeah.
Because come to think about it, I'm just thinking like I could probably eat a whole lot more pork in one
Yeah.
sitting than beef. I hadn't really considered that before. Now, yeah, because is it possible to do like a wagyu pork? Because the fat just won't enter the meat in that same way, right? It's one marble.
I mean, you wouldn't see it visually because you figure the red, whereas you see the white penetrating. And I think because pig is also just such a fatty animal to begin with. I don't know. I don't know. I also don't know if the flavor would be the same either, because I think with beef the flavor would be more pronounced, whereas pork you might get it, but I don't know. I don't know if anyone's done that before.
Yeah, would the fat just be stored on the outside of the animal? You have like really thick bacon, where it's like a really thick layer of fat in the bacon instead
I
of just the regular layers.
I think there's something to that because like different animals store fat differently, so the fat would build up in different areas. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into that. So with this one, you think there's a chance maybe they boil the meat first to just do some of the cooking, then cool it down, then bread it? Because yeah, that can be tough to get the interior cooked.
I mean, the other thing you could do is drop it in the fryer, brown it, and then put it in the oven for
Yeah,
a little
braise it.
bit. But
Yeah,
yeah, but we'll put it at a certain temperature so it finishes on the inside, and then you time it just right. So you pull it out and then you let it rest a little bit, rest as well as carry over cooking, and then cut it through the middle. So, when it rests, the idea for those who don't know, resting is where after you cook meat, you're supposed to let it sit for a little bit and the juices redistribute. If you don't do that and you cut into the meat right away, it bleeds everywhere and then the meat dries out. So you want it to rest. The resting time depends on the size of the meat. The bigger the meat, the longer of a resting period it needs. But the idea is that the juices redistribute. Then when you cut out, the juices stay retained in the meat. Whereas you'll see a lot of people will cook steak and they cut it right away and it just bleeds everywhere, then gets dry. It's no good. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had pork in a while. I think it's time to look up some pork dishes and make some pork chops or something, some apples or something, just something. You haven't done some. Yeah, pork it's a slept on meat. Well, I guess it's not that slept on in the West, because they have in bacon, but just straight out just pork is pretty good.
The French expression, right? Tout est bon dans un cochon, which means all is good in a pig.
Yeah, yeah. All the different parts. Yeah, it's a good animal. It's a good animal.
You can eat the feet. You can give the ears to dogs. You can make head cheese. The intestines are for sausage. You eat the tenderloin. Belly is for bacon. Bones, stock. Everything pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. They say this does look like a light thing, like the fennel salad there. Again, you have the pork milanese, and we're Calabria, so it's from different kind of places, and then it's a good dish. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So on to the next one, which is something that's more typical to think of, with the Dolly Varden burger, the DV burger. It's a beef blend, Gruyere, smoked bacon, tomato jam, baby arugula, and fries.
Yeah, this was another dish I added later because I was saying how they had a burger, and this is one of the only things I hadn't tried, so I figured I came in and got it recently. Pretty straightforward. I didn't ask what was in the beef blend. My sense is it's probably similar to what Minetta Tavern does, like short rib, brisket, chuck, maybe one other thing or something. Gruyere cheese, it's the Alpine cheese. If you have French onion soup, you've had Gruyere. It's croque monsieurs, things like that. Smoked bacon, you can see that right under the cheese there. Tomato jam is nice, a little bit of sugar. It tastes like they put a little bit of vinegar in there, so it's a little bit of acid, it's a little bit of sweet, but it's also savory. Baby arugula type of lettuce, fries, and it's on I think that's a Kaiser roll, so it's not brioche or something. Nice burger, simple but well done.
Yeah. And also it's baby arugula, because we had a burger before in the previous part, but it was with a chicken breast. Is that also baby arugula on that one? Yeah, it seems like it's also baby arugula on that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That one was the yard bird, which is fried chicken, pimento cheese, bacon, buffalo ranch, and pickled chilies with the baby arugula. As we mentioned before, y'all, if you're having burgers, if you're at home or you're out somewhere, I know if you're at McDonald's or fast food place, it's normally just the iceberg lettuce, but Steven has put it perfectly. It's just crunchy water. So definitely go for a different sort of green if you want to put it on sandwiches or burgers or things like that. I think with of course it's decent in salads, but even with salads, it's a good base, but it's something you want to play off of. I can't think of very few things where I'm just I just want iceberg to be the star of the show. It's nah. Yeah, and I was thinking with the burger blend. This is a burger blend thing. Okay, with burgers, what is the thing you're supposed to use? 15%? Is it the one where you're supposed to use leaner mincemeat or higher mincemeat? What's the
so what it is it depends on what your goal is. We learned about this in school because it's different fat. It depends. If you're striving for a healthier burger, of course you add less fat. If you're striving for a more flavorful burger, you add more fat. So what some people will do is they'll take chuck, and then because chuck is a very tough cut of meat, very high in protein but leaner, and so then they'll add more fat to that to sort of make it more pleasant. Other people will use short rib and brisket because those naturally have higher fat content. Plus the flavor will be a little different. In school, they played around with different ratios. At one point, they had one that was meat to fat. It was 90-10. It's probably healthier, but it was super dry because the fat content's low. Then I've seen ones that are 70-30. I think I've seen even 60-40 meat to fat. That's a lot. It's a high fat content. You can do different things. Again, but I think with some of those cheaper ones, they just take chuck and they add fat to it. Whereas these other ones, they actually use the different cuts of meat, which already have more fat. So that, gives it a nice texture. Yeah.
60-40. That's gotta be.
Yeah.
It's gotta be weird. What we got? So, and this is another thing to think of because sometimes I'll get other meats minced, like goat, or you can get chicken. I mean, if you're at a butcher, or you might have the mincing machine yourself, but if you're getting your stuff from a butcher shop, you're in most supermarket stuff. There's actually a butchery area. You can ask them to mince any meat that they get. Of course, even if it has bones, they can try to like cut it off the bones, and they'll probably still charge you for the cut that you buy with the bones, and then they can after you've paid for the full thing with the bone in, they can remove the meat section and then do it. I'd say if you're going to do that, still keep the bones. You can make a stew. You can make you can make things with it as well, like bone soup and things like that. It's really good. But so
Well, I was gonna add to that too. You can also buy a KitchenAid attachment with a meat grinder, so you could also just buy chuck and fat and then just mix it yourself, weigh out the
yeah.
ratios, then throw it into the grinder. Then you just have ground beef and do whatever.
That's what I was going to say. If you're
Yeah,
going to use something leaner like a chicken,
yeah,
you might think of finding a way. Maybe they can add the chicken fat,
yeah,
but if you're doing it at home, keep the chicken fat or put the skin in there. Then that will
yeah.
have some of the chicken fat of the fat, because that's one thing that might, for those people who are trying now different things at home. If you're trying to do certain things that you're trying to substitute minced meat with other meats, like even with pork, like we said, get some of the fat from the rind and put that into the pork, because pork itself is a leaner meat. But then when you're actually making the mince for things like burgers, you're going to want some fat into it. For most people, will want at least 10% or some kind of fat they want in their burgers. And if you take that out, it's not there. Okay, with burgers as well, what is your take on burgers and sauce, with egg or without egg?
Like you mean in the meat itself,
Yeah, and the
or
meat
like?
itself. So, because some people are like, egg has to be in there. Some people are like, okay, that's without the egg.
See, I don't know about that because I mean I know people with meatloaf you have to put egg in because it's a binder, like the meat will hold together, otherwise it separates. With burger itself, I don't know. I mean I've seen a lot of people do it without. I mean I've made it with, like, I feel like my mom or grandmother has made it with egg. I mean I don't think any of the high end places put egg in there, at least to my knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. My mom is more of an egg person. I'm more
Uh,
without. I just don't think it's necessarily that added. Yeah,
yeah.
it's not that needed. But yeah, and just the fries, the bigger cut fries. It looks like double
Yep.
fried here, not the triple fried we had at. What was the place that had the triple fried? It was the place that you used to work at. Was it?
Barbaloo, not
No. It was forgetting the name of the place. It's closed now. I forget the name. If it comes back to me, you'll remember it.
sure.
Yeah, the triple. Yeah. All right. So yeah. Well, how was the burger though? It's good.
It was good. Like I said, it was simple, but I mean, it was well done. Like, it's definitely above average for a bar. Cause like you went to House of Brews, it would have been like plain white bun, like iceberg lettuce, plain tomato. You know, it would have been like this was definitely a little elevated. I mean, it wasn't like it didn't blow me away, but I mean, for a bar, it was definitely above average. You know, for a burger. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So on to the next dish here.
Yep.
And now we have um, the missus is here.
Yep.
Is you gonna do her introduction in this series, or are we gonna like just like a poster picture with it, or is it just gonna be the food?
We can post the picture.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
this is when I went with her. I have the dish by itself. Then my lovely girlfriend Christine with the
Okay.
dish itself. Yep.
And the dish is a steak à poivre with a celery root, leeks, and potatoes.
Sure. So as I was saying with the duck à l'orange, this is another classical dish that they've sort of reinterpreted a little bit. So steak au poivre, you can probably tell poivre means pepper in French. So typically filet mignon, they use a different cut here though. I'm not 100% sure which one it was. But they put black pepper on the outside, they sear it in the pan, and then typically you make a sauce from the fond. That's the residue left over in the pan because that has pepper in it. So you typically add cognac, there's cream, there's usually herbs and other things that usually will get served with the steak, typically filet mignon, like I say. What they did here though is they did similar to that. They didn't put any cream in the sauce, so you can tell that's why it's clear. It's more of a typical jus with some peppercorns in it. But there's celeriac puree on the bottom. The potatoes are cooked in duck fat. You can also get those as a side. They're nice. They're sort of confit and then crisped up, so they're crunchy. There's some roasted sunchokes on the plate as well. That's the light brown thing. There's leeks. They taste like they were cooked in butter and just cut through the middle. And then just some celery leaves and scallion on top. Nice, again, nice like little elevated version of a classical dish. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think now. I'm trying to think. And you like it? We talked about this in the first part as well. So like the coleslaw. Cole is like was Dutch or not for cabbage. So
Yeah.
it's like cabbage salad is a pretty much thing. And in the first part that we didn't man that Skype didn't send it to us, we talked about it also like, okay, for me it's just like cabbage and root and a root because it's cabbage and carrots to be coleslaw. Now I'm trying to think, and we also talked about how flexible cabbage is.
Yeah.
And now I'm trying to think like leek might be the second, might be on that flexibility type of thing because you can fry it, you can make soup
Yeah.
out of it, you can. Now I like it in salads. Now I'm trying to think of doing like a coleslaw with just leeks instead of cabbage. I'm like, why do we think of doing that?
You
But
could
then,
do that. That'd be a strong flavor, but you
yeah,
need to
it's a
do
lot stronger
that.
because when you
Yeah.
cook it, that actually gets some of the flavors down. But that's one of the things maybe you can add to a coleslaw. But very thin slices are really chopped up to, and not even like a full leek, like to somebody. Because leek is a very strong flavor. It's like
Yeah.
almost an onion, isn't it?
Yeah. It's
It's in the
onion
same
family. Yeah.
onion family. Yeah, it's like a. We're talking also the Pokemon type of thing.
Yeah.
It's like the Charizard version of like of a spring onion or like a scallion, whereas like the spring onion is the spring onion is the first version is the Charmeleon? Is the Charmeleon one? I messed it up again. What is it?
Well,
Okay,
I wouldn't
it's
really.
Charmeleon, then Charmander, and then Charizard. Okay, so the Charmeleon version is a spring onion. Then a scallion is different. Then
No,
it's like what?
I don't know if I don't know if I would really make that comparison because you're comparing different species and some of them the flavors vary a bit. Like I was going to bring up ramps. Ramps are in season soon. I don't know if you've had those. They're a little thicker and the flavors a cross between it's a cross between leek and garlic, which is kind of interesting.
Okay.
So in German the name is actually Bärlauchen, which means bear leeks, because some people think the leaves look like barriers. I don't really think so, but that's where that comes from. But they come to season in springtime, and basically they grow in these clusters in the woods, and you get them. And a lot of chefs will buy up a ton of them, and what they do is they'll serve the leaves now because the leaves have to be used, but then the stems will they'll either pickle them, they'll preserve them, or something in some way. So like when I worked at Bar Balloon, what we did was we bought a ton of leeks, and what they did was cut off the leaves and either saute them directly or make a puree with them. But then the stems they pickled, and then they serve those with charcuterie the rest of the year. So you buy up a ton of them, but then the pickled and preserved ones you have, you can just serve as time goes on, and then you can serve them through like fall, winter, whatever, and then like by the time next spring comes, they'll be back in season again. Yeah.
Uh, so they said the ramps look like barriers. What the fuck?
No. The name in German is bear leeks. That's how it translates.
But you said because it looks like barriers. What is wrong with the
No, no. So,
Germans?
No, someone was telling me they're like, oh, because they like the ears look like the leaves look like their ears. I'm like, I don't see that at all, honestly.
Like their
I don't know
ears?
what.
Okay. Well, it looked like kind of like rabbit ears. Okay, I thought you said barriers. I'm like, wait, barriers?
No.
Barriers? What? Okay, yeah, no, ears. Yes. They kind of look like rabbit ears, kind of.
Well, I was saying I got to introduce my dad to this because he loves garlic, and this is like a cross between leek and garlic. So I think he
Yeah.
would like it a lot. Yeah.
See if I can find it around here because that does sound pretty good. But yeah, with celery roots. So this is again different kind of ways of using celery. Yeah. Okay, now maybe we're talking about the iceberg lettuce. Now this could be a thing where now you have iceberg lettuce, which is just like I said, crunchy water. Now if you have crunchy water, then you can now spice it up, whatever iceberg lettuce dish that you have, with like very thin celery root, because now that will be that strong taste with like the yeah. I think that's how I'll try it out. I'll figure something out. Oh yeah. So yeah, otherwise with steak, yeah, it's the good kind of thing. I think there should be some places where it's like if you order it like rare, they should be like, no, we're not doing that. I mean, no, sorry, if someone's like, well, I want it well done, like, no, we don't do that here. So like, no, you can go eat that somewhere else, make it at home. It's
Well,
just really
certain places like with duck, for example, I always do it like medium rare, and some places will say like you can get it well, but we discourage it because it gets tough, but it also develops this metallic flavor. Like a lot of game meats, when you cook them well, they get that metallic flavor, and like you can get that, but it's like it's not recommended because it's like they don't want you to get it and then complain you don't like the taste.
yeah. Okay, so on to the next one.
Mhm. So this is
Okay,
the last of the entrees. Yeah, we're getting into desserts now. Yeah.
yeah, so the first dessert that we have here is a cookie skillet, which is vanilla ice cream, whipped cream, chocolate sauce, and fruity pebbles.
So this was nice. I mean, kind of a kid's dessert, but I thought it was cute and it was a good pairing. So the cookie they make in the pan, in the cast iron pan, My guess is they make the cookie dough in the back, form in the pan, bake it to order. Last minute they bring it out, vanilla ice cream, whipped cream, some fruity pebbles on top, chocolate sauce as well. I'll have to show you at some point. This place I went near where my parents live, actually, there was a fruity pebble cheesecake. I was actually impressed at how well fruity pebbles work on dessert. It's kind of like, oh, this is something I ate as a kid, but I'm like, wow, this works pretty well. But it's again, it's like kind of a gimmicky dessert in a way, but it was fun. It was pleasant, and again, the metal pan is hot, so they'll always warn you, be careful, don't grab it suddenly. Yeah.
Now again, with these things, the Fruity Pebbles, same thing with Fruit Loops. Are they different flavors?
That's a good question, actually. I don't know. I'd have to try them side by side because I
I
just like
remember
when I've
being a
had.
kid and trying it, and I was like thinking, yeah, are they?
Yeah, it's like M&Ms or something where it's like they all taste the same. It's just the
Yeah.
colors. Yeah.
But those are not supposed to be fruity. Like that's the thing, because they fruity pebbles. But I think if they were different flavors, they would advertise that a lot
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
they actually. They wouldn't just be like, it would be like different. It's like tangerine, raspberry. They'd say that, but no, they don't. But in your mind, if I ask you, you probably think they are just from the different colors, because we're just so like associated with this color having this kind of taste, and they're ready to the fruity and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I remember like the Fruit Loops, like I remember having them at like my grandparents' house, and I'd pick out like, oh, I like this one, I don't like
Yeah.
that one, and like my siblings are like, yeah.
It's a thing we did. But yeah, because let's say you just had white Fruit Loops. You did put the food coloring in it. Would it taste any different? But I think in your mind it might. But
Yeah.
the actual dish itself wouldn't taste any different. But yeah,
Remember they had the Apple Fruit Loops for a time too. Those were popular. Yeah.
I
You
mean
remember
Apple
those?
Jacks.
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
they were. I think they were originally like an introduction to Fruit Loops, and they made them like its own thing or something. Yeah.
yeah. Now those were that. You see, those ones did have some apple-ish flavor to it,
Yeah.
which is a thing. Yeah. Okay, apple. Yeah, yeah. I remember Apple Jacks. What other kind of? Yeah, most. Yeah, they mostly go with like spicy rather than fruit.
Yep.
I prefer more like spicy. Like for me, my favorite cereal is Cinnamon Toast Crunch rather than. Oh, of course, and then also Captain Crunch. Yeah,
Yeah.
Captain Crunch is amazing. But yeah, what is that whole mouth cutting thing? What is it about it that does that? You know?
Well, wait. What was the question? Sorry, I
With
didn't.
Captain Crunch, it like cuts something inside of your mouth. Like, why is that?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't had Captain Crunch in a long time. Like I had it, like it was one of those like because I always say to people it's funny because like when I was a kid I wanted to get all these cereals, and now being more conscious with my diet and stuff, it's like I have no like I could buy them but I have no desire to. So I haven't had these I haven't had any of these sweet cereals in like I don't know like 2 decades or something.
Yeah, so there's some things I'll still occasionally just go, but that's the whole thing where you could literally just go out and buy like an entire full-on frosted cake and just eat it, but you still don't do it. And
Yeah.
sometimes sometimes like I'd abuse like the like I'd be fasting where I can eat all day, then I'll just go get like right after Valentine's Day when they have the cheaper chocolate. You just get a whole thing. You're still getting you still within like 2,000 calories if you just eat a whole box of those mini boxes. It's like all you eat that day. But yeah, it's like a full meal. You want to call it a meal for like $3 because it's like a discounted. But yeah,
Well,
don't take
that's
advice
what
from me.
but that's what I've been saying too about how like I cut back on dessert and stuff just because in general diet and I'm cutting back drinking as well. And like I'll have dessert if like I had something the other day. If it's a creative dessert, something I don't see all the time, I'll get it because it's interesting. But it's like I'm not gonna buy chocolate donuts and snack on them. And I remember like when I was staying upstate with my family, I fell into that bad habit because my mom would be like, "Hey, let's go to Dunkin'. I'm getting a donut." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll have one. I'll have one." And then like you feel it catching up with you, and I'm like, I can't be doing this.
Yeah. Okay, I went to a website to try and find the thing. I'm not even going to name the website because the website has an autoplay that started playing some video with the sound. I don't like that, so I'm not going to talk to you. And yeah, so I just went to this Captain Crunches. It's a not secure site, but it says no one can deny the experiment. Nothing to do discussing it. So why does Captain Crunch hurt the roof of your mouth? It's a problem for anyone else. But my dad and I have a thing Captain Crunch because when you eat a ball of it, it always hurts the roof of your mouth and it can be done. Yes, because it's really crunchy. Let it sit in the cereal for a while. No, you can't do that. I like my milk frozen. I'm talking like crystals of frozen milk on it when I have it. To the point where let's say I'm going to have a bowl of when I was still having still having cereal. I'll take like I'll keep the cereal aside, put a bowl of milk there, and then put like enough cereal that I can finish the cereal in a couple of bites so it doesn't get soggy. Like I really don't like soggy cereal. I like the frozen thing. My brother occasionally used to put them in the microwave, and I'm like, "What are you doing? It's not oatmeal. It's not porridge. Like yeah."
Are
So
you
so that
are you familiar with Momofuku Milk Bar?
yes, I've been there
I
once.
I still haven't been there. I thought that was just a very clever concept. Like it's something like a stoner had to have come up with, but the idea of you let sweet cereal sit in the milk, you strain the milk out, you make ice cream from it. Like I just thought like that's one of those things that like you feel like a pothead came up with it, but like it's a great idea. You know, Fruity
Yeah.
Pebbles ice cream, Captain Crunch ice cream. Yeah.
I went there once. I had the crack pie. Remember, there was a time it was very like popular. It's like a trendy, one of those trendy things. It was okay. I also went to another one of the trendy things that I got to. Where I guess it was after the trend as well. There was that one when the rainbow bagels were a thing.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah,
remember
I
those.
went to one of the places that was one of the main places I was doing. That was pretty good. That was actually It tasted more like a donut, but still pretty good. Oh yeah. Next one.
Yep.
Now we have the Il Flotante, which is a citrus creme anglaise and candied nuts and orange zest.
So it's il flottant in French. That means floating isle.
Okay, Il
So
Flotante.
yep. So classically, what it is, it's meringue sitting in creme anglaise. Creme anglaise, for those who don't know, that's actually the basis for vanilla ice cream.
All
It
right.
means literally English cream, and that's how it translates. And what it is, it's like egg yolks. Basically, you work this custard over. You basically make eggs and everything. You have eggs. You sort of start whipping them up a little bit, and you have milk that you're heating up, and you add that to it like gradually, because the idea is you have to temper the eggs so they can absorb the milk, but not like you don't want the eggs to curdle from too much hot milk at once. Excuse me, too much hot milk at once, because then the eggs just curdle. But the idea is you gradually add it to the eggs, and then you keep adding, and then the eggs cook in a way that gradually so that the sauce will thicken, but it doesn't curdle. And then you like would strain it off, and then you would either serve it like as a sauce for a dessert, or you'd put it in an ice cream machine and make vanilla ice cream. And then so there's that on the bottom, the meringue, soft meringue on top. Candy nuts. What they did here was they candy nuts and then they shaved them thin, probably with a microplane over top, just run them over the top. There's some blueberries, some orange, and then I want to say that was purple. I think it was purple shiso. That's what it was. I was really impressed with this dessert for this place. I mean, this to me was about on par with something that Bar Balloon would serve, and I was like, for the type of restaurant that's really impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a rather involved dish, where it's not that straightforward to make. The ingredients might be straightforward, but the presentation is pretty good. What kind of leaf is this again on top of it?
Shiso. So it's also
Okay.
called Japanese basil. Oh, the other thing I was going to add is this is a good example of full utilization of product, because with the creme anglaise, you separate the yolks from the whites, so you can use the whites to make the meringue, and then the yolk you can use for the anglaise. So you separate them, you whip up the meringue, have the meringue, and then you have the yolks, and you have the milk that you temper. You simmer with vanilla, temper, pour it in, and then so you use up everything, but just in different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing Stephen taught me about the desserts is you
Yep.
have the four C's. It's caramel, chocolate, coffee, or citrus.
Coffee.
And this one has the citrus. It
Yep.
has I guess the candied kind of caramelish when you candy stuff.
Yeah, it's a
Mm.
stretch.
Yeah, but the citrus is there, and then the first dish, of course, had the chocolate that we saw in there. Yeah, so that's
I mean,
something
on
y'all
on
can
a
also.
very technical level, like caramel, there is caramelization, I suppose. But I think when they say caramel, they mean like there's visible caramel that you can taste, and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the citrus does it for this one. Um, I should add like a fourth C with like cream. I mean a fifth
Nah.
C. They should add a fifth C, but
Well,
you know,
cream's not really a prominent flavor on its own. That's why.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, and it was also something where we wonder like who was the first person to come up with creme anglaise? Like who's the first person to come up with like ice cream? Maybe we'll do like
Yeah.
something where it's got in the history of ice cream. But yeah, so that looks like an interesting dish. And as you said, for a bar restaurant, this is a rather rather interesting sort of dessert. But this is it's expected from this place with them doing
Yeah.
these things. And my hat's off to the chef, the
Yeah.
people who came up with these dishes. They continue to
Yeah,
impress.
but I was just impressed that I even thought, I'm like, wow, this is on par with like Bar Balut, maybe even DB Bistro. And I was like, for what this place is, that's really an achievement. You know, because again,
Mhm.
House of Brews, you would have gotten like store-bought cake with whipped cream on it or something for it. Uh,
Yeah. All right. Now moving on to the next one. This looks more like an appetizer than anything. It's definitely okay. So here you have a pumpkin panna cotta with a cocoa crumble. Now here you have the
sure.
cocoa, of course.
Yep. So panna cotta, for those who don't know, it's cooked cream in Italian. So it's cream usually cooked on a stove, and then originally they used raw milk, which curdled naturally, but because of all the rules and everything we've talked about that, they thicken it with gelatin. So the idea is you mix up a milk mixture on the stove, add flavorings, whatever, then you add the sheets of gelatin, then you pour it into portions, and then when it cools, you have a solid shape. So what they did here was they made a pumpkin flavored one. They poured it into a mold, so it's actually shaped like a pumpkin, and then they put a green on top. I thought that was kind of clever. Cocoa powder. I wish I had written down what the white powder was. I'm trying to remember. It was some kind of flavored powder. Um, I wish I could remember what it is, but it was some kind of like it was some kind of spice flavored powder or something. I had mentioned before about tapioca maltodextrin. We talked about that a lot in the seasonal presentation, where you you have this powder that you can add any flavored oil to and mix it in, and it'll retain the powder form, and then it'll take on that flavor. So there was like cheese powder, there was beet powder, there was horseradish powder, all that. So any flavor you add to the oil will be absorbed into that. Then when you have it, it sort of dissolves in your mouth. Very nice. This was in season fall time. We took Angela there for her birthday, actually. Um, this was actually, I think this was the other visit because, yeah, we have a birthday dessert coming up. But I think we went back and then we tried this dessert that time. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's panna cotta. The way the presentation looks like, if y'all are probably familiar with the pumpkin patches when you're picking pumpkins for Halloween and stuff. So I think the cocoa powder is supposed to look like you're just getting it out of the ground. So that's an interesting presentation. And that's another thing for a bar restaurant like this. They've actually gone into a little extra effort to actually do more
Yeah.
with the actual plating and the presentation of it. There's
Yeah.
seems to be a lot more thought going into this place than your typical bar restaurant. But then maybe
Yeah.
they're also understanding that this is New York City. There's a lot of competition in the place.
Yeah.
As you said, know your customer and things like that. So they're trying to reach, and also, of course, the Instagrammable ability of this. There's a lot of people going to come, and so yeah, I can see why they've done that. But again, my tip of a hat to these people for their efforts.
Well, and like I say, I mean,
Well,
how do you stand out and how do you retain people if you do basic stuff? Like if you've already been established, you are an Irish bar that's been there 40 plus years or whatever, and you have people that have just been coming in, yeah, you can sort of rely on this, but it's like if you're a new place trying to prove yourself, you have to do something a little different or you're just gonna get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. How many people were you seeing, like, from the times that you've been there, who just come in just for the restaurant? I mean, just for the restaurant. I mean, no, sorry, just for the bar. Where they just like come in, get a drink, and they're out.
I've seen it very mixed. I mean, I've seen people that have come in at the bar and just get drinks. I've seen people that have come in and gotten whole meals. I've seen people that have gotten a bite and then gone elsewhere. I think I think this place, it's well situated in that sense that you can do all those things, which is good. So it's like if you want a full meal, you can go there. You want a drink, you want like you're having a drink and you want some wings to go with it, you can do that. And I think it's good because you can appeal to all these different people. I mean, you could bring kids there too. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
I don't because what I'm saying is like I mean there are people drinking, but it's not like rowdy drunks that are gonna like cause a scene or anything like that.
Hmm. Okay, now I'm seeing the interior here of this next picture is of the next part,
Yep.
which is an apple tart tatin with brown butter ice cream. But I'm seeing on the wall here they have, I think that's the inside of the coach car. So we had talked about the exterior part, that outside part that was added in
Yeah.
part. Was it added because of COVID, or was that there initially?
I think that was added because of COVID, but I'm not sure because, like I said, when I left to spend time with my family, it was kind of under construction. When I came back, it still wasn't open. But then, like a little after I came back, it started opening again. But that car was there, but it wasn't there when I left. So I don't know if that was like them planning. Okay, we have to have outdoor dining, so let's do this. Or yeah, I'm not 100% sure of the history there.
Yeah, because we were wondering with if the design of it was towards the cable car that they said in the explanation past there. So I
Yeah.
don't know. It seems to be a bit reddish in the interior here, so it might be somewhat to it. But yeah, y'all can let us know if you know more about it. But even the interior seems to have some of the wall, the top of the
Yeah.
ceiling seems to have some maintaining some kind of that older type of
Yeah.
design. But yeah, okay. So tell us a bit about the apple tart tatin with brown butter ice cream and
Sure.
yeah, you
So
have Andrea and
Angela.
Angela there. Yeah.
So this is where we brought Angela for her birthday. It was kind of funny because Andrea kind of called me last minute and was like, "Oh, it's Angela's birthday today. Do you have any places that we could go?" And I was like, "Oh, why don't we go to Dolly Varden?" And now she's like, "Okay." And I was like, "It's a bar, but the food's definitely above average. I think you'll like it." And I had actually eaten already, but it was like they had dinner. I think I just had a drink and hung out, and then we shared some of this dessert here. So for those who don't know, tatami, it's basically like an upside down pie. What you do is you brown fruit, sorry, rather, in a pan on the stove, and then you put it in a pie tin, and then you put the crust over top and then bake it like that. And then when you serve it, what you do is you flip it over so the caramelized fruit is sitting up, like facing out. And there's some story about how the Tatin sisters in Paris, I guess they had fruit on the stove and they forgot about it and it was a little overdone. So they figured, how do we salvage this? Let's put it in a tray. Let's put a pie crust on. Let's bake it, then flip it over. And then it just became a popular dish. And you can see there's lots of Tatin. Like I've seen apple, I've seen pear, I've seen peach, I've seen clementine. You can do a lot of different stuff. I mean, any caramelized fruit, just it's usually it's layered like that. So it looks more presentable facing upward, and then the crust is on the bottom. So it's similar to apple pie. The difference with like an apple pie is you wouldn't cook the fruit as far on the stove, and you would have a crust on the top and the bottom. Whereas this is only the crust on the top initially. You bake it, but then you flip it over so that caramelized fruit is facing up. Yeah. And then brown butter ice cream, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Butter, for those who don't know, has milk solids, which when left on the stove will turn brown, so it gets this crunchy, nutty flavor. You mix that into the ice cream. I don't think there was vanilla. I think it was just cream based, and then it has that flavor plus some sugar. So it went really nice. This was in November, so of course you can tell the different fall flavors there.
I think a fifth C could be cake, but there's cake in there because a cake is a dessert. Like I guess you could have cake for like anything else, but like cake is dessert. But here, the caramelization on the fruit, does that count? Is that enough of a caramelization for you to think to count as the C for caramel?
I would say so because, like I say, it's not just technically done, but I mean, you taste a distinct flavor. Because if you have apple pie versus this is distinctly a caramelized flavor, whereas apple pie, it's cooked, but it's like it's sweet, but it's not. There's none of that browning of the sugar. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also with the butter aspect, is that's another part of making caramel. So it's like
Yeah.
it's kind of like caramel almost there in different parts and different kinds of.
With
Yeah.
butter, I would actually say that's a different thing because the thing is with sugar, what it is you're actually browning the sugar. But with meat and things, there's something called a Maillard reaction where it's actually a protein component in the meat and things that gets brown, and that's what gives it the flavor. So it's when people say like, "Oh, the meat is caramelized on the outside," that's not right because it would be caramel if it were sugar browning, whereas the Maillard reaction is the proteins browning in a certain way. Yeah.
You said meat?
Well, what I'm saying is because butter has milk solids, but as solids, but because it's animal based, it's a protein based compound. It's not sugar browning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because okay, with caramel, isn't it like sugar, milk, and butter?
Well, yeah. Well,
Or
but
is it heavy cream? Is it heavy cream?
yeah,
It's not like
right. That's how you make caramel. But what I'm saying is caramelization is just sugar browning. So like anything
yeah.
that's sugar browning, like caramelized onions, it's because the onions naturally have sugar, so you're cooking them down, and then that sugar in the onions browns. That's why the onions turn brown.
Yeah. But yeah, I think so. We're at the end of the food for Dolly
Yeah.
Varden.
Yeah.
So that's the end of part two.
Yeah.
We've come to the end of it.
Yep.
You've had most of the food on the menu now, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing Stephen had been talking about. He's been there quite a few times, and he's wondering if the menu's going to change. They said it's like the winter menu right now. Is what you said. It's
Yeah,
still on the thing?
it still says that if you go on their website, it says winter menu. So my sense is that they're in the process of updating it. As I've said a few times, I think it's the issues with the staff changing. Um, was even posting stuff on Instagram. I noticed they didn't even have a location. They just still had the House of Brews location, but they like it just said House of Brews, and I couldn't find Dolly Varden. But they finally gave it its own location on Instagram. So, and then I was talking to the woman. She's saying, "Oh, we're gonna do a lavender cocktail with spring," and I think they're probably working on some stuff. My guess is they're probably just running out this menu for the next few weeks, month, whatever, and then it's like in the meantime they're prepping other stuff, and then that'll be So I'll be curious, when that comes out. I'll definitely go back and try all the spring stuff.
Yeah. So Dolly Varden might might add it for like one of the shorter ones. Maybe if it's the
Yeah,
spring stuff changes and the few things different, and
yeah,
Steven sees that and has those, we might do that. So that'll be a couple of months from now. We might come back and do like a shorter part of the few
yeah,
new dishes that he's tried out. But that's the end of the food for this time. And next part is going to be just the cocktails. And the cocktails will tell us which type of food he's had.
yeah.
So yeah, anything else you want to say about Dolly Varden before we sign off for today?
Not really. I mean, great place. I think definitely underrated. I brought a few friends and my girlfriend there. When my family comes back, maybe bring them there. Good stuff. And I don't think you spend that much money for what you get. I mean, especially for Midtown Manhattan. I mean, I never feel like I've been ripped off there or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you all have seen, it's rather varied. It's a different kind of take. I kind of like that where someone's like, "Oh, what kind of food is it?" It's good food.
Yeah,
You don't have to say it's this, it's that. I mean, you just kind of go. But even just look through the menu itself, and you'll see that there's just the stuff seems to pop. At least to me, just reading through the menu, it's like, "Oh, that looks good. That looks good. That looks good." Then you actually look at the food itself. Well, that is good. And yeah, it just turns out to be a rather good place there, and it's an interesting kind of organization with a bar restaurant type of thing, fitting a different kind of niche. And as Stephen said, this is one of the few restaurants that, with the pestilence of accepted but unknown origin happening, a lot of places closed, and this is one of the few places that actually opened during that time and
yeah,
seems to be doing pretty well. So that's pretty interesting. My best wishes to them to continue
yeah,
that success, and Stephen shall continue to be one of the patrons of that place.
yeah.
But yeah, all right. So anything else?
That's all. Thank you for
Okay.
listening.
So yeah, guys, gals, and everything else in between. Till next time, goodbye.